welcome in to the Just Basketball Show, your twice weekly NBA, WNBA, college basketball, all things hoops podcast. I'm Chris Manning. That is Brendon Kleen. Today's show is another loaded episode. We're going to get into, among other things, To Think I Saw It on League Pass, our recurring segment where we bounce around, look at different things we saw while watching League Pass. In two cases, really, we have an in-person thing for, I think, each of us. And then one of these games was nationally televised in a game that we haven't had a chance to talk about yet based on our recording schedule, but was one of the marquee matchups of the early part of the NBA regular season, that being Boston and Milwaukee. And then we're going to do our weekly segment, Waving the Flag, talking about the Orlando Magic and the Sacramento Kings. Later this week, we're going to have Brad Rowland, host of Locked On Hawks, writer at Dime, all these great places. You've heard him on the show before, perhaps. We're going to go through our Eastern Conference check-in. Got a bunch of questions about the East we're going to answer with Brad. We're going to do the same thing for the West as well in the coming weeks. So check in on these conferences now that we've got some real basketball coming up. At Brendon, we should tell people, too, about our friends at Thrive Fantasy. Thrive Fantasy is a player prop DFS platform where you can pick more or less on your favorite players across multiple sports, including the NBA and NFL. Sign up today with our code JustBasketball, and Thrive will match your first deposit up to $250. I should also note that myself, our guy Colby Olson, we are going to be over on the Just Basketball TikTok doing props, doing lines we like for in-season tournament games, and when that's over, we're just going to do some NBA games. We're above 500 right now. We're doing great. Helps to go against the Jazz. It helps to go against the Wizards. It helps to ride with someone like
Pacers
Nikola Jokic.
Defense. Always go over on every single statistic of every player involved in a Pacers game. That's a good rule of thumb as well.
Yeah, I might just be there with Tyrese Halliburton in general. So that's fun. I love him. We're going to talk about him shortly. Brendon, but let's go to Think I Saw It on League Pass. And I think personally we should start with Boston and Milwaukee. So to me, the thing that popped most about this game was the Jaylen Brown-Kristaps Porzingis partnership. It has not been a great start to the year for Jaylen Brown. It has not been, I think, the all-NBA caliber guy we saw last year. But I thought this partnership was particularly good against Milwaukee. 5 of Brown's 7 assists in the first half went to Porzingis. Porzingis has obviously been a real fulcrum, I think, for Boston this year. Has really unlocked some things. And I think all the different variations we saw in this game, particularly when Jaylen is driving and he kind of does that little burrow up thing and he kind of shields himself, uses his big frame, and KP rolls and it slides into the dunker spot without having to roll that hard. They're all just really good. And when I think about this and I see this in this game, a game that I thought Boston, despite the late comeback from Milwaukee, really was in control of. This was a Boston game. Boston is the better team of these two right now, kind of win for the Celtics. And I think what we saw from that partnership in particular and what that could mean for where this offense could be later in the year when we've seen this offense have real issues and has been one of the things that has held them back from winning a title the last couple of years. This is really encouraging, I think, for Boston. This partnership looks so good in this game. I'm getting pretty excited about the ceiling for the Boston Celtics this year.
My thing with Jaylen and his chemistry with Porzingis so far is it just gives him something to do on the court on offense, right? Like it gives him a clear structure to operate in. And it honestly reminds me of one of the other tandems we talked about, which is a little more fraught to bring up in this current moment on a previous iteration of To Think That I Saw It on NBA League Pass, which was the Chet-Josh Giddey duo.
We should just stay away from Josh Giddey right now is all I'm going to say.
Yeah, but I'm saying I just said it was more fraught, but I think it is similar in that it just gives a little bit more structure to an offense that I think between Boston and Oklahoma City is somewhat similar, right? Where it's different big skilled players at every position. They want to play fast. They want to, get up threes. They want to run through their best player in Tatum or Shea. But when you can just kind of build out these little two-man game actions, it makes life easier on everybody, but especially, on those two guys. This year so far, Jaylen Brown is assisting Kristaps Porzingis 1.4 times per game, Chris. There's never been a player that Jaylen has played with that he's assisted more than once per game in his career. Not Tatum, not Time Lord on lobs, not some random shooter they had along the way, nothing. This is the first time it's even been close to an assist per game to one specific player, and it's on its way to 2 if they keep developing this. So you're seeing it on lobs, you're seeing it on drive and kick, pick and pop. They're filling it out, and I think what is the coolest part of this maybe is they love playing with each other. Like, that was the thing that jumped off watching that Bucks game. They're smiling, they're communicating, they're like, nonverbal cues and pointing. It just feels like they are so locked in, and we're only headed toward 20 games into the season. This isn't even playoff time, and they're already showing in the stat sheet how connected they are, but also seemingly, really enjoying themselves. When only Jaylen Brown is on the court this year, Chris, the Celtics are minus 17 net rating in 120 minutes. Mm-hmm. When only Porzingis and no Jaylen is on the court this year, they're minus 12 net rating in 50 minutes. So, I know that starting lineup has been killer. That's going to sway those numbers. But when those two are on the court, that's been the recipe. When you take one off and leave one on, they haven't been quite as good. Like, any way you slice it, these two guys are really driving high-level stuff for Boston right now, as they've been, far and away, I think, the best team in the league to start the season.
And I think on top of this, Brendan, this is pushing back against, I think, some of the weaknesses of Jaylen's game. This partnership is setting up Jaylen Brown for success. And I think if you're Boston and you're trying to build out your offense and build out the ceiling of your team, that's kind of the guy that I would be looking. I don't have even if we've had some moments with Tatum in the playoffs where it hasn't been perfect, right? I tend to think that Jaylen is the one where there's more needed room for emphasis and taking care of him in some way and giving him structure. Jason Tatum, to some degree, all players need structure of some kind, but Jaylen needs to have some of this. And particularly, I think he has this habit where if you go back and watch a ton of some of his worst moments, he drives into too tight of spots, and then he can't get out of it at all. And this is saying, hey, here's a 7-foot dude who's got a great touch, who can score from wherever you're going to get him the ball if you just get him a good pass, and we're simplifying his role, and we're not asking you to make a crazy read and find him as like the third guy. It's like, hey, there's your one read. Otherwise, we can reset. We can go ISO with Tatum. We have other options. This has been such a boon for Jaylen Brown, and I think it makes, even with some of his struggles, I think this has just helped him be functional right now. The numbers you said, they're crazy. They're absolutely bonkers, and it's so early, they'll probably normalize a little bit, you would think. But this is just such a good way to get Jaylen out of some bad habits. And this win particularly, I agree with you. This is the best team in the league right now. Denver doesn't have Jamal Murray right now. I still defer to them, and they have the best player in the world. But at the very least, this is the best team in the East right now, and the Brown-Porzingis partnership is at the heart of it.
Yeah, Jaylen is on pace for the second lowest turnover percentage of his career right now, quietly, even though I agree, shots haven't gone in. His role is in flux. It doesn't always seem like he makes the best shot selection decisions, but if he can play mistake-limited basketball, I think that's the number one thing you really want out of him, and he can flesh the other stuff out as the season goes along. My first observation here, let's go with Zion Williamson and Brandon Ingram and how that pairing is coming along for New Orleans. I'm a unabashed Pelicans fan. I'm not afraid to admit it. I've watched as much of them as any team in the league so far this year. They are 9-8 right now. They beat our beloved Sacramento Kings twice this week. They also have a win recently against Denver, but then they lost against the Jazz because Zion is not playing back-to-back. So it's another up and down weird season for New Orleans as they try to get healthier. But coming off of that win against Sacramento, with both players on, Chris, the Pelicans are +4 per 100 possessions in 250 minutes. Now, the weird thing is they're still better than any combination when both are off which should not be the case for your two best players.
No.
But I think the biggest kind of thing to take comfort in is they're playing off of each other better. There's very simple actions. As long as they're playing with quick decision-making and purpose and the right types of lineups that they're kind of just unlocking as the season goes along and they finally stack up minutes playing together. And then when only one is on, they're a big negative. So that tells me that let's get our best players on the court. Let's figure out how to play with them. Let's incorporate them in actions together. It's working. And so be it if the bench is really good too. Like, I don't really care if you're good with your best players off the court. Like, that's kind of the case with the Warriors this year too, finally, for the first time in years, is when Steph is off, they've actually played well because Chris Paul and that bench unit have been pretty solid, whereas Clay and Wiggins have kind of held down the starting unit. So, like, that doesn't really bother me. It's mostly when they play, they're good. And that'll take them a really long way. And I think it'll continue to get better as Trey Murphy heads back and CJ McCollum gets right. Like, they've weathered this storm and figured some things out during a stretch that could have upended their season.
I still am in this spot with them where the Zion thing, there's just times where it leaves you still a little bit wanting, and that you see him just be unguardable and you're like, oh, right, this could be one of the transforming players of this entire league. And Brandon Ingram is, as we've seen the growth the last couple of years, like, can be this really great, I think, number 2, 1A kind of guy on a really good team. And we're just waiting on them to put it together in some way. That's kind of been the thing we're waiting for. They're going to get Trey Murphy back at some point, you would think, right? Like, and add to this. I'm kind of with you that I'm not. I don't think I'm quite as in on them as you are, but I think I am getting there, Brendan. I think I'm I think I'm slowly but surely becoming a Pelicans believer.
I'm a fan because I just covered the team when I was a young blog boy. I'm not sitting here telling you they're going to be a title contender this year.
No,
I said
I'm not,
fan like I just like the team. I'm just a fan of, like, I'm a fan, like the most little, heartwarming meaning of that word. I don't know how good they're going to be.
Well, can I just hit you with their numbers over the last 2 weeks? This is part of, like, when you watch them and then you look at the numbers the last 2 weeks, this convinces me that I think they're starting to figure something out.
Mm-hmm.
Last 2 weeks, let's clean in the glass. Point differential plus 6.8 per 100 possessions. Offense, 117.9. That's 12th. That's about nearly 2 points better than league average. The defense, this is the number that surprised me the most, but is also maybe the most encouraging. 111.1 defensive rating. That's 6th in the league over the last 2 weeks. That's 5 points better than league average over that stretch. They're just playing good basketball right now. And if Zion and Ingram are there and they still have assets to play with, like, this is just one of those teams that's going to be hard to quit. Now, for the year, not great overall numbers right now. The offense for the year is still not great, but it feels like something is brewing here. And I think particularly beating the Kings is a real feather in their cap. I think that's those wins where you kind of look at it and go, oh, okay, maybe something's getting figured out here.
Yeah, and Denver. I mean, I think
yeah.
So the most common lineups with Zion only in terms of high volume that are actually working, Dyson Daniels, Jordan Hawkins, Matt Ryan, Zion, and Larry Nance. So that's the small lineup. That's just kind of, we need Dyson for some defense and playmaking. He's not much of a shooter, but other than that, it's just space and slice. The most common Ingram-only lineup is Dyson, Hawkins, Ingram, Herb Jones, Jonas Valanciunas. So a little bigger, a little slower, but, give Ingram somebody in the dunker spot, hit the glass, have some spacing, have some cutting off of his high post action. And I like that they are, again, also trying to figure out when only one is on the floor. We'll see how CJ slots back into this. They have too many good players, and they have for a long time. But, again, I'm just optimistic that this could have tanked them and that they are not only checking some boxes on the defensive end, like you mentioned, some of these lineup things like I'm talking about, and they have a real path to continuing to get better. So, yeah, I don't know because I want to see the finished product and the actual healthy version of this squad before I try to say, yeah, they'll be in the Western Conference Finals or something crazy like that. But I feel good about their trajectory. They're healthy, and a lot of their young guys are improving. Like, that's where you want to be in November and heading into December as an NBA team. What's your next one?
Tyrese Haliburton and the Indiana Pacers, Brendan, are having such a moment. They won their in-season tournament group and are having this awesome year where their offense is unbelievable. They are putting, like, they've had the Hawks game as the headliner, but they had that first one over Cleveland in group play that was also just a high-scoring bonanza and featured amazing Tyrese Haliburton scoring. He also was shit-talking a fan at the end of that game when he was trading buckets, and, like, seeing Haliburton have a little bit of an edge was kind of cool because he's kind of a very mellow. He comes across as a very mellow, like, reasonable human being, and not like Draymond Green type losing his mind at everyone around him at all times kind of thing. So that was kind of cool to see him take some crap from someone who just shouldn't be. Like, don't yell at NBA players at games, that's weird, but like respond to it and stick it in their face in a cool way. They're beating all these good teams in their group and the Pistons, who are god awful, and like I feel very bad for Pistons fans right now. But they outpace in their group Philly, Cleveland, Atlanta. That's not nothing. And, Brendan, I love that the tournament is giving Haliburton and giving this team a chance to play something, to play for something, have a chance to, that probably is not going to be there for them in April, May, and June. The fact that Haliburton and the Pacers are getting to play for something, I think is a big deal for them.
Yeah, I mean, they're for real. I think that they play the second fastest pace in the league right now, and you can't guard their offense. They put Buddy Hield back into the starting lineup over Ben Mathurin. Obi Toppin is coming along. This is exactly the type of team, I think, if you're just talking about it from an in-season tournament standpoint, that you hoped would seize this thing, right? Like, you hoped a team like Indiana would come out of group play or really try to win these games in a important, meaningful type of context, and they have. We'll see how far they go in the knockout round. I just find it really hard because we talked about all the great stuff about Haliburton. We're big fans. We had Rob Mahoney on. I have a hard time right now not talking about their defense, or at least focusing on their defense when I'm watching them, because it's awful. It's like beyond bad, and I want to throw this at you because I'm curious if you think it's real or if it's just like trying to kind of retrofit things we know about the team to almost like cut them some slack on the defensive end. Because, you know, I watched this up close with the Suns during the Nash years. Yeah. And I think that there has to be something to the idea that it's harder to play defense when there is just so much energy and chaos in the game at all times. Like, they chuck threes. They're like 6th in three-point frequency. They foul a lot. They turn the ball over a decent amount. Well, I guess the fouling a lot is a separate issue, but they turn the ball over a decent amount for a great offense, and they chuck threes. And then when they play defense, it's like they're never set. Ever, really. They have the worst transition defense by a mile. Like, all these different indicators that you would look at, you're going to notice that it just feels hard to ask any team to guard in that type of a context. So, I think that's right. I think they also, if you look at just on like a personnel level, you go up and down the roster. The roster skews a little bit younger. You know, Mathurin's year 2. Toppin, you know, he's been in the league for a little bit now, but is still like a younger guy, even though he came in the league older, but he is what he is. He's not going to be a good defensive player, I don't think. I mean, I think that's the thing with Obi Toppin, regardless of how young he is.
Yeah.
I mean, right?
Yeah, it's not going to happen. Jarris Walker, is a rookie. And like, you have like Miles, and then you have Buddy Hield, who's a specialist, not a good defender. He's big. He can be a big wing, but he's never been a good defender. Bruce Brown is a good team defender, smart, but he's not good enough on that end of the floor to create a good defense for you.
But I think but that's the thing. Like, Bruce Brown and Miles Turner, I think, are the exact places to start. It's like, that should be the anchor of a good defense.
Well, this is what I was going to get. I think it shouldn't necessarily. I don't know if I want to go as far as to say good, but it should be better than 29th. If you look at defensive rating,
passable.
Yes, the only team. Here are the bottom 5 defenses in the league right now: San Antonio, and this is going from 26 to 30. San Antonio, Utah, Charlotte, Indiana, Washington. That's not where they should be based on having Turner and Brown. I think that's correct. I think the pace doesn't help them. I think the 3-point stuff and probably some chaotic energy that stems from that. I think you see that with offensive rebounding at times as well, where that can create chaos in certain situations when you're just chucking threes. But they shouldn't be, 29th in worse than Charlotte and worse than Utah, who has a really bad defense. And yes, they're 2 points worse than the Wizards, but you shouldn't even be within the realm of the Wizards, who are just awful. And when you have an offense that is as good as theirs is, they're nearly 2 points better than the second best offense in the league right now, and that's Atlanta. And it's well above league average right now. It's legit. I agree. You shouldn't have this thin margin where you're 9-6 and your point differential so thin. You should be a better team than if your offense is that good. I also think they don't play. He doesn't play a ton, but I wonder if there's a world where maybe someone like TJ McConnell could also just give you another body to be a competent, create some steals, create some chaos on that end of the floor. But when I'm saying, hey, you need to trust TJ McConnell at age 31 to maybe help your defense, that there's probably some bigger systematic.
Well, he would help their defense. I don't think TJ McConnell at 31 is some sort of embarrassment to have to bring onto the court.
No. But if that's your big personnel switch, that to me is there's something else there you need to figure out. If it's scheme change, if it's whatever it is.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying is I think that what we're learning is I think Bruce Brown and Miles Turner are good defensive players in the half court with a set defense where Miles Turner can play drop, stand at the basket, control the paint. Bruce Brown can actually read what's happening in front of him from the opposing offense, fight through a screen, get a steal, get a good contest up. There can be real help. But even watching that Pistons game on Friday, which was probably closer than the Pacers would have preferred. I mean, Jaden Ivey's back in the starting lineup, had a solid game. Cade had one of his better nights of the year, but that game shouldn't be close. But I'm watching it, and it's Cade's hitting a double drag screen in semi-transition, and it's Bruce Brown's guarding him, but there's chaos behind him. There's no help. Miles Turner is barely getting into position because I think teams also know they can run it down the Pacers' throat, just like the Pacers are doing to other teams. I think that the problems come down to a few things. One, they just shouldn't foul so much. That they're league worst foul rate. That's something you can clean up. Maybe there's always going to be some of that if the pace is so high and there's a little bit of chicken with your head off kind of nature to all of it. Maybe you're going to foul more than the average team, but you don't have to be the worst. And then the transition defense. Again, maybe there's a little bit of lagging that you're going to have to deal with because you are so aggressive at all times that there's going to be opportunities with those threes, with those turnovers you're going to give up at times and all that stuff that it's going to be a mess. But again, you don't have to be the worst. But the other part of it to me is they just play too small. I think that they're just going to have to confront that at some point. If they want to win playoff game, and I know we can kind of have the kid gloves on with them or the baby steps perspective, but this was a team that when Tyrese was healthy last year was a playoff team. He just missed a big chunk of the season. The play-in tournament didn't kind of land their way. They didn't make it in, and it feels like that was another losing season for Indiana, but it really wasn't. This is year 3 of Halliburton, second full season. They're ready to win, and I think at some point they're going to have sort of a come-to-Jesus moment where it's we got to try Jarris Walker. We have to put, maybe I don't think you can trade Buddy because he's so important to them, but maybe Mathurin plays less, and you have some bigger lineups in there. Maybe you try to get away with maybe Toppin's not literally playing the 3, but can you get another forward out there with him so that there's actual help that you can send and any sort of resistance you're able to put up? Because right now it's I don't really know what they're supposed to do. If Bruce Brown gets caught up on a screen, Miles Turner's a little bit out of position, and somebody's just bum rushing to the basket, it's what do we really expect here based on how you're playing and who you're putting on the court? So they're going to win a lot of high-scoring games. Like when we say that they're the fastest in the league, them in Atlanta right now are like a half a second faster than like the 5th fastest team. Like it's not even close, which is kind of why I compared it to the Suns of the Nash years. It feels like that right now, but very quickly those Nash teams realize, well, hold on. We can't just win this way. We got to balance this out in some way, shape, or form. And, I think we're going to watch Indiana try to kind of come to terms with that and figure out what their answer is the next half of the season, because they've learned from their team. Tyrese is an MVP candidate. We're a playoff team. Let's operate that way.
Yeah. What is your next one, Brendan?
My next one is, let's go to Jabari Smith Jr. Back to the West. Jabari Smith Jr., it's not pressing the panic button. It is not a 5-alarm fire. He's had a good season. A lot of the efficiency numbers and things like that would lead you to believe, no big deal. Like nothing's really wrong. He's shooting 50% from the field. His numbers are pretty similar to last year, and they're winning. Great. I guess it's just to kind of point out the trade-offs when you operate the way that Houston did this offseason. And I think, to me, Amen Thompson, he's a rookie. I'm not going to worry too much about what his season looks like. I think he'll play once he gets healthy a little more and be back out there, have some moments. But to me, it's Jabari Smith Jr. who is kind of where the buck stops, or whatever you want to say here. His usage is down almost a percentage point, and his three-point frequency is up. So you're really seeing him transition into full-on role player this season for a team that, again, is trying to win. They're running their offense through Şengün and Van Vliet. They're playing a lot of vets, even off the bench, and trying to win games every night. Jalen Green, we can talk about, but the other part of this, Chris, is on the last Sunday, I think it was, maybe Monday, they played the Lakers. Down to the wire game. LeBron went off. Dylan Brooks and him were going at it.
Got the good Rui quote out of that.
What's up?
You got that good Rui Hachimura quote about Dylan Brooks and LeBron out of that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. We talked about this game on the last episode. And I think I mentioned the kind of giving into Dylan Brooks' worst habits in some ways from that game. But the flip side of that was Jabari Smith. Like, why not let him guard LeBron James? He got like the first 6 minutes of the game that way, and then Udoka flipped it. And it's like LeBron still went off for like his normal numbers. I think he had like 37 points in that game or something. So it's like Dylan Brooks didn't really put up a fight. But it's these little ways where the trade-off of we don't have our pick, we want to spend money, Tillman Fertitta's tired of losing, I'm Ime Udoka and I'm here to win, turns into a little bit of a strange season for a promising young player. So, again, it's not to attack Jabari, it's not to say anything, but I was really looking forward to what can he do off the bounce this season? What can he do as a team defender, turnover creator? Can he have a leap defensively similar to like Keegan Murray is sort of having? Can he really start to feel like a real number 2 or 3 option on a good offense? And we're just not even having the chance to see that stuff. He's not having the chance to prove it, and the team is going to have a harder time evaluating him as a result.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly well said. I think when you are in a situation, you either have someone like Şengün who is vitally important to what they're doing and how they're playing, and he gets the benefit of some of this, of getting Van Vliet in there and getting Dylan Brooks in there and having, I think, everything a little more locked down and than it was. I think that has really been a catalyst for him in the way he's playing. For someone like Jabari Smith, it's like Dylan Brooks kind of comes in. It's not 1-to-1, but Dylan Brooks kind of takes some of the responsibilities, the chance for Jabari Smith to spread his wings on that end of the floor in particular. There's a loss there. There's absolutely a loss there. Jalen Green is like another, as a point of comparison, is rating out better in terms of analytics, but if you look at his like just kind of counting stats, they're not vastly different than they were a year ago. And so what do you do with that? I think both those guys are kind of have had their roles a little bit changed just by the fact that people come in to do things at a more adult level than they were maybe capable of, but then they don't get a chance to grow and figure stuff out. It's that roster to me is still, Brendan, like in need. Like I want them to trim Like if they're a team that even though they spend and they're winning and they're good, I kind of want them to maybe move some stuff around just to kind of clear some space for some of these guys. And I want just Amen Thompson to get as many minutes as they feel like they can give him when he's healthy and good. I think that's just worth it.
I mean, that's another part of it too. Is like you're seeing like Jayshawn Tate feels like somebody they could
Bingo.
easily trade.
Take his 20 minutes and turn it into more Tari Eason minutes. Turn that into Amen Thompson minutes. Turn that into 32 minutes for Jabari Smith Jr. instead of 30, and let him do some of the stuff Eason is being asked to do. It'd be a pretty easy switch.
Sure, and
even if I'm
but
sure
it's like even on the
might want that
backup playmaking, it's like Aaron Holiday is getting minutes. They have Jeff Green and Jock Landale playing backup center. Not that I think Jabari Smith Jr. is a center and you should just like do crazy gymnastics just to get him on the court, but it's just examples of places in the rotation where it's like, I get it. I know that this season was going to be this. You made that very clear with how you chose to operate. You were going to sign Brook Lopez on top of everybody you ended up with, but at the same time, you're going to feel regret if you plateau Jabari Smith or have unanswered questions about him that kind of you didn't need to put yourself in that spot with. So I hope that he earns the trust of the coaching staff by taking the sacrifice. And he's been really good-spirited about it every time he's been asked, I want to win. I don't care that I got benched in the fourth quarter, all this stuff. And that's the right mentality, but there is nothing that can replace reps, minutes, like that's what a young player needs. So at some point, like, let him spread his wings a little bit more and hope that you still win, but maybe you won't. And it's just going to have to be the way the cards fall a little bit.
Can I ask you one devil's advocate question?
Mm-hmm.
For someone like Jabari Smith, and to a lesser extent Jalen Green, I think, does the fact that they are not breaking through in these circumstances, does that tell you something about maybe what their ceiling is as a player? That you put these, not training wheels, that's not the right word, but you bring in some veterans, you try to emphasize winning, and the fact that someone like Sengun breaks through but these other guys don't, does that tell you something about those guys and does that change your ceiling? Does it change anything how you might feel about them in their development because they're not breaking through kind of organically in a more winning environment?
I think it's just too early to say. That's a boring answer. I'm sure you feel similarly, even though you were asking a question.
That's my answer as well. I just wanted to ask.
But it's like that's why I started with usage, right? Because Jalen Green has basically the same usage as last year. And as I said, Jabari's went down a little bit. And then Sengun, it's like, well, they're running all their offense through him, whereas before they weren't. They had Kevin Porter Jr. or Josh Christopher or some of these really inefficient players who were handling the ball. I will say, though, Jalen Green in November has been a lot better. And so I think he is kind of on the way up. He's shooting 43% in November, which is over his season average, 35% from three, 57 true shooting, a little bit of a bump up in usage. So I think he's kind of on the way up. They use him a lot. It's just a matter of where his shot's going to fall. I think both Jabari and Jalen have played good, solid, efforted team defense. Like I think that those are also positive things. But in terms of their ceiling, you got to just play through the growing pains a little bit, even if, you take a loss or two extra over the course of a season. Like, you can't just pretend like that process doesn't exist because you gave Dylan Brooks $80 million. Like, it has to happen one way or another, or you're going to regret that you never let it happen, I think.
Yes. All right, let's go on to my next one. Let's go in person, I think. I have one more. I have my last one. It's in person. You can do this quickly. So I got to see a guy named LeBron James in Cleveland on Saturday. Ever heard of him?
I have, yeah. Good player.
Important to the history of the franchise.
Yeah, they did a tribute video again. Was this for the scoring record, or was this just you're here, record. Might as well? Okay.
Scoring record, but they did have a welcome back like LeBron sign like in the hallway at Lakers locker room. Here's Brendan.
Do you think the guys on the team right now ever get tired of it?
Yeah, I would be annoyed if I was them. I don't know. You can't say you can't
be played here.
Well, I mean, even post-game media, like I went to hear JB, and it was ended up being Donovan Mitchell and Jared Allen talking post-game. And usually, like, all the beat guys were there. Most of them went to listen to LeBron talk yesterday. I caught the end of LeBron, but like he takes over. I mean, even in the arena, the amount of people wearing LeBron jerseys, both Cleveland and Lakers, is pretty astounding. He's also just like, we've talked about this. He's been unreal this year. He's tapping into something that is crazy for someone his age, but he did some shit in this game, Brendan, that was just like, how is he doing this? The first bucket was spurred by him and AD trapping Mobley. They forced a turnover, gets an easy N1. Mobley had a real problem with his physicality in this game. And one other thing that I really liked is Austin Reeves has not been maybe as good as you might have hoped for them this season. But seeing it in person, I really like him as a roller with LeBron. It's not quite an inverted pick and roll, but the twist on that concept is really good with those two guys. I get why the Lakers are playing two bigs, and they were running this set with two bigs kind of lurking. But I would eventually like to see that if they can find a way to get more shooting on the floor and run that as like close something resembling 5 out or 4 and like one of Jackson Hayes and Christian Wood in the dunker spot if AD's sitting. I think there's ways that this team is really on the verge of something. That was a great game. It was high scoring. It was competitive. Cleveland remains a little bit snake bit because Darius Garland they get Mitchell back and Garland's back, and it's okay. Dean Wade's still out, but they're getting closer cores back. And then Darius Garland hits his head on the floor and has a neck injury, and we don't know as of now if he's going to play on Sunday against Toronto. So like that team just is having a really tough run of luck, and as far as injury goes, but LeBron, man, that guy, I go see him if you can. The tickets for this game were nutso expensive for people trying to go last minute compared to like every other Cavs game right now. Understandably, not great for people, but that guy remains a freak. He also, Britta, where are you on dunks and getting a technical when you hang on the rim for a little bit too long? Because he got a tech for that in this game. I think it's stupid. It's dumb. Okay, disagree.
The refs are really the stars of the young NBA season so far. It's been a treat getting to watch them do their work every night. That's why we turn it on. This league, man. Refs going crazy. Refs having opinions about everything. Refs having personal vendettas with Hall of Fame point guards who play for the Golden State Warriors. It's been just a treat, really. I love them. LeBron is shooting the best field goal percentage since his last year in Miami. Do you want to know how old he was that season?
Can I 29. Guess? I was gonna guess 28. Yeah, I was gonna be because it was like It was like that blend. It was
he probably turned 29, I guess.
Yeah, because he's December birthday. Boy,
that man
has a museum. That man has a museum about his like career now in Akron, and he's still out here doing this shit. It's unbelievable.
It is. All right, my quick in-person one. The only game I went to this past week was the Portland Trail Blazers, so I don't have a lot to report back on here. But I actually do want to just shout out.
Just Scoot in the goggles. Did you see Scoot wearing goggles right now? I'm in on it.
I did not.
He's in goggles.
If it makes him get to play basketball and make this team watchable sooner, I'm all for it. What I will just say about the Portland Trail Blazers is I think that they've actually done a pretty good job of finding deep bench guys that are going to supplement this team well once it hopefully turns a corner. Maybe that's still a ways away. We'll see. But between Kamara, who they got in the Ayton trade, who's already starting for them and at least is a good defender, we'll see what he can be as an offensive guy. Duop Reith is probably somebody nobody listening to this show has necessarily heard of, but he's a 7-foot 3-and-D big. Jabari Walker, who has been on this team for a while, just like a funky, switchable, floaters and passing forward combo big guy. Like they have 3 or 4 real, maybe 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th men who don't make any headlines right now because they're a god-awful team, but in 2 years, 3 years, when they're trying to make their push back into relevance, all those guys on, that's like what turns into Isaiah Joe on the Thunder this year. You know what I mean? Or some of these players that nobody pays any attention, like Isaiah Jackson on, not to somehow I did Isaiah J twice, but like Isaiah Jackson on the Pacers right now, or when these teams start to take a leap, those are the players who are going to make a difference. So Duop Reith went on like a personal 10-0 run in Phoenix in this game, and Tamani Kamara was making life hell on Booker for a few stretches. So shout out to, I guess, Mike Schmitz and co over there scouting the depths of basketball everywhere across the globe and finding these guys. But That's it. No LeBron James takeaways, no Austin Reeves takeaways. Just do-wop breathe for you, Chris.
That's the sicko shit that we're all about here, Brendan, is all I got to say.
Absolutely.
All right, next, coming up, waving the flag, Orlando Magic, Sacramento Kings. Got to tell you first about our friends at Homage. Homage is the ultra-comfortable specialty apparel company. Brendan's got a great Jimmy Butler shirt on right now. They have NBA, WNBA licenses like that one. They use vintage-inspired designs to pay homage to the greatest stories, traditions, and figures across sports, music, and pop culture. Use our link below to make your purchase and support the Just Basketball Show. It's holiday shopping season. They have great deals. They have NFL starter jackets if that's your jam for someone in your life. They have all kinds of great NBA and WNBA stuff. So use our link. Buy yourself or someone you love something nice for these holidays, and you guarantee you won't regret. Brendan, the Homage shirt's just the softest you can get.
So soft, so comfortable, fits well. Jimmy Butler with a lasso. The Miami Heat are a force once again in the NBA, even though they who did they get blown out by last night? Somebody not great by a lot of points. The Nets by 15 with nobody on their team playing, but I still will support.
Lonnie Walker and the Brooklyn Nets, baby.
Nick Claxton back. That's really the big thing.
Yes. By the way, Cyber Monday sale through Monday, 20% off store-wide at Homage, and $200 orders free. Go to crewneck. Check that out.
Boom.
All right, waving the flag, Brendan. Orlando Magic, let's start there. Win streak, have 2 wins over the Bulls. Beat the Pacers, beat the Raptors, beat the Nuggets, beat the Celtics. We both had, in our notes, you shouted out the Denver game. I went to the Celtics game. Let's start with the Denver game. What to you popped about their win over the Denver Nuggets?
Beating the Denver Nuggets, first and foremost. I almost had them in my what we saw on League Pass in terms of Michael Porter Jr. Conversation for a different day, not having the breakout stretch minus Jamal Murray that maybe we had hoped for, but beating them at all is huge.
Defense for MPJ, I don't think it's been quite as good as we maybe thought last year.
Well, let's just start there. Let's start there because I think that the Nuggets could not stay in front of Orlando's ball handlers at all.
Mm-hmm.
They were just allowing paint touches over and over and over, whether that was Cole Anthony, Paolo Banchero, Franz Wagner, Jalen Suggs. Everybody was getting to the basket, and then that's how you pile up points. Like, I don't understand fully how the Magic went from is their offense going to just destroy them and hold them back to, like, they're putting up 110 plus on good teams all of a sudden. But here we are. In the past 2 weeks, the Magic are 13th on offense, which is a little better than their overall mark, so they're headed in the right direction. And then on the other end, you just saw the length and physicality and honestly, like, strength of the Magic defense give Denver problems, without that two-man game to go to when it's just Jokic spraying passes to cutters and shooters. He's been frustrated a lot during this stretch, Jokic, like not putting great effort in defensively, not really looking to score as much as maybe he could to just will his team to a win. And when he's kind of playing that way and they're not, in a good rhythm, the Magic were able to stifle them pretty consistently. There's a lot of funky lineups they're using and, Jonathan Isaac doing his thing and everything else. Jalen Suggs getting into a fight with Jokic. They're just a pain in the ass to deal with. And when you also can't guard them, the game is over. Like, that's it. If you're not going to make their offense work hard, you're going to lose to the Magic. That's where we're at because their defense is going to give them a chance to win every game. And that's what happened. The Nuggets lost a high-scoring game to a team that they should easily be able to outscore. In this case, they didn't.
Their defense is just outrageous. Like, they're in every single game because the defense is that good. And the fact that they're doing this, Brendan, the defense has remained as good as it has without, like, Wendell Carter Jr., and they're putting in centers that I think long-term they might look to improve on in some way or probably aren't long-term cogs for this franchise, and Goga and Mo Wagner, unless Mo Wagner is going to be, like, the brother, like, kind of hangs around because, like, in the brother tax.
Yeah, he might get to stay on the team, but we'll see what his minutes look like.
Better than Thanasis, at least, though. Gotta say,
yeah.
At least you could play him.
No, Wagner's a good backup big, I think. But yeah, I think Batadze he wasn't even playing before this. So yeah, they're doing this without many of and Fultz, who's their best point of attack defender.
The fact that all of this is happening, their defense is just going to keep them in games, and if the offense, like, it's simple, and I don't think it's sustainable for them to win in a big way. It's like one of the evolutions that I think we're going to need to see with them. But, like, if you go against Denver and you have Paolo and Franz do what they do, and maybe that's enough on certain, that can get you someone that can maybe sneak. That's going to make you an annoying out just because you have those two guys. The Celtics, Brendan, win for me was an outrageous defensive performance in a very similar way. You look at the game details in that game. Boston's offense this year has been incredible. Boston's offensive rating in that game, 94. 90-fucking-4. That's like 1990s basketball number. That's with a free throw rate like in the top like an insanely good 36 free throw rate in that game. Like, they just took a ton of free throws. Didn't matter. Offensive rebounds stifled. Turned the ball over like averagely. They just got stops. They held the Celtics down in the half court in that game. The Celtics half court offensive rating in that game, 79.4. That's in the bottom 10% of things this year. They just stifled them in that sense. At the rim, in the mid-range, on long mid-range, from three. Like, just that defensive performance every night is stifling. It makes you want more, and for me, it just makes me continually just want more from the offense. It makes me just feel like there's something here if you can fully just unlock the offense in a real way.
Well, so
beyond
to that point,
the Denver part of it.
I think that they're playing with much better pace lately in general. I think that that's been one of the key things that you're seeing, and I hate to try to pin it to somebody. Maybe it's not even fair to do it, but it's in my head. I'm already halfway through the sentence. I think it has to do with Markelle Fultz. Like, I just think when you have one player who is best orchestrating a very deliberate set on every possession, it's the Chris Paul curse, right? It's not that different from that, where when you play that way, you're going to play slower. And it doesn't just mean pace, like how many possessions per game or the, offensive seconds to shot or any of those metrics. It's just even in the quicker semi-transition, let's just go moments. Well, it's going to have to be, let me get a guy to set a screen and I'm going to snake around and then maybe I'll find Paolo on the wing and then he'll settle into a high post thing. And now it's 8 seconds left, right? But when you don't have Fultz out there and when you have, I think, Suggs getting the ball in his hands a little bit more, I think him knowing kind of the rules of engagement when it's Paolo or Franz handling and when to cut and how to be effective there. And Cole Anthony, who deserves a huge amount of credit and I think should be, I've seen some whispers of this online, like he should be a 6 man of the year candidate, like a real one, somebody who should actually, maybe be in the lead in that category. I guess Chris Paul would probably have to be up there too right now. But when all those guys are playing more and the offense is settling into a better groove, I think that goes a really, really long way. And they closed with Cole Anthony in that Denver game. They closed with Cole, Suggs, Paolo, Franz, and I believe Batadze, but it might have been Wagner, either way. And I want them to do that more. Like, that's what we talked about early in the season, and I kind of regretted, like, being so harsh on it, but it's like, we're not saying make a huge trade. It's just spread the minutes around in a way that makes a little bit more sense. It's not that different from what we were talking about with Indiana. It's like, let Cole Anthony try it, like let Anthony Black close some of these games, even when Fultz is back, if he's the better option. Like, I don't think you should force feed Ingles and Harris minutes.
No.
Because maybe that's to the detriment of your team overall. That gets back to the Jabari Smith conversation we were having, but it's like, there's combinations here that are already working on both ends of the court. The bench lineup, led by Cole Anthony right now, is plus 13 net rating in 115 minutes. That's Anthony, Harris, Ingles, Isaac, Wagner. That lineup just eats teams alive. It's like crazy on defense because of Jonathan Isaac, but then it's spaced out to the max, and it's just, running up and down the court like crazy. Just lean into what's working, I think would be the message for me. And Jalen Suggs is getting everybody's attention. I just want to say, the original flag we planted before this season was on Jalen Suggs' island, and it never has been pulled out of the mud. It's been there the whole time.
Despite, every time I see him, Brendan, you got to shave it, my guy. It's time. He's got to do it.
It is time, but, he's feeling good. Maybe it's similar. They're on a win streak. Maybe it's like the baseball guys who don't shave their beards. Maybe he was just about to. You never know. And then they started winning, and he said, never mind, I'll wait.
Maybe. Here, the last thing on the Magic. Brendan, their recipe right now, and this defense first, suffocating, just enough scoring, how they keep the defense intact while doing, I think, necessary roster improvements to get the most out of the offense and evolve this team. It's one of my 3 favorite questions to think about in the league right now.
It's going to determine how far they go this season. The defense
but even,
is 7 points worse per 100 possessions with Cole Anthony on the court. Like
it's even just
figure
beyond.
It out. You got to find the mix.
Yeah, and it's even, I think, just beyond this year. It's next year and the year after. It's like as these guys grow up, like how they figure this out to me is just, it's one of the going to be the coolest roster building things we can discuss as far as team building goes. I think.
In terms of their recipe, what you were saying, let me throw this at you real quick. Pelicans of the East. I know that they're only like 5 miles from New Orleans geographically, but like...
well, it's more than 5 miles, but yeah.
Thank you. I actually thought it was 5, so I appreciate the clarification.
You just like really undersold how far like Louisiana and Florida are. I gotta look this up.
But it's just funny to call New Orleans not the East, but Orlando is, as if it's like some other corner of the world. It's very much the same part of the world.
I mean, the fact that like Memphis is like a Western Conference team is hilarious.
Well, this will get fixed with expansion because they're going to have Vegas and maybe Seattle, and then they'll move Minnesota and Memphis to the East, and that'll get us where we need to go. All right, so Pelicans of the East, they have 2 jumbo creators. They have kind of a hodgepodge at point guard. They are best when their defensive personnel is on the court, but they need to figure out how to make the offense work. And they, can at their best are flying up and down, forcing you into turnovers and getting downhill. When I watch them, I'm like, oh, I've seen this recipe before. I've seen this mix. This is just New Orleans a little younger and a little further east.
And I have less concerns about the durability of the superstars, which is a big deal. Just straight up a big deal.
Yeah, but do you agree with the stylistic premise?
Yeah.
You always want to talk about the health of Zion Williamson. It's like your favorite topic. His name comes up and you're like, oh, let me mention that. I'm asking you about their style.
Okay, yes, but how could it not with Zion? Because it's like what has held him back from being what we thought he could be? And it's like,
yes,
I look at Powell. Of course
it has. Okay. But I'm talking to you about the Orlando Magic.
Okay.
Not David Griffin's nightmares of Zion tearing in another muscle or something. I'm talking about the Magic, because I think thinking about that template makes it easier to imagine, okay, what do they need to add? Who do they need to get? The players aren't identical, but it starts to make a little more sense. Whereas if you just watch Orlando, sometimes you're like, what is this going to turn into? Whereas if you think about it that way, it's like, oh, it'll look like that.
So who is their CJ McCollum, I guess, is then my question.
Yeah, that's the question, right? I mean, we thought we wanted them to maybe pursue Van Vliet, or could it become Anthony Black? I mean, I don't think he'll ever be as good as CJ, but can he add enough offensive juice to make the other stuff he does good work? I don't know. I think that's their thing, is who's that guy going to be? Or maybe Paolo and Franz have an even higher ceiling as like all-around creators than Ingram and Zion do. Maybe they don't need that guy, but it's a fascinating question.
Yeah, curious to see if Levine stuff with them ever kicks up. I'm kind of not a Levine guy for them, but that's the name.
Levine's like too much, I think, of that.
Yeah, it's a little too much. It's not enough of. Yeah, it's not enough of like the creation kind of thing CJ can do, where he can Levine's not going to slide in and out of that in the way I think I'd want to kind of juice everything else. Brandon, just real quick, can you give me your best guess on how far of the drive it is from Orlando to New Orleans? I got Google Maps up.
This is I'm a Westerner, so I want everybody to know that this is a pure guess. I'm gonna say 12 hours.
Oh, 9 hours, 16 minutes, 600.
Okay, I was going to say 10, and then I went over because I didn't want to undershoot. So my first guess was 10. I was close.
Yeah, you just overshot a little bit. That's okay. All right, Sacramento Kings. Brennan, you have a question that one of, I think, the best NBA Twitter follows that is around Nate Jones threw out on Twitter. So why don't we start with that, and then we can talk a little about De'Aaron Fox.
So this also, we're back to Zion Williamson. This stems out of the Kings losing to New Orleans twice this week, and their inability to keep Zion from doing Zion things, and their paint defense overall. Even though their defense in general this season has been better, I'm not really sure how much I buy that, like, in a playoff setting, the ceiling of this team defensively is any different than it was because the personnel is mostly the same. But the question from Nate Jones that this couple of games reignited in my mind is Domantas Sabonis to the Sacramento Kings of this generation, this era, what David Lee was to the burgeoning Golden State Warriors dynasty about a decade ago? Meaning, is there something that has to happen where Domantas Sabonis gets usurped by whatever Sacramento's version of Draymond Green at the 5 is about to be in order for Sacramento to hit its ceiling? Where do you stand on that? Because it's a very big question, and it's hard to ask it when the wins are coming. But it's exactly the same as the Warriors, right? They were good with David Lee. They were great with Draymond Green. So if you're thinking about that jump for the Kings, does it have to include some sort of adjustment or improvement on what Domantas Sabonis is giving them, despite how huge he's been for their turnaround?
I think the part of this I don't quite like is David Lee certainly, like, moving on from him and getting into small ball 5 and Draymond at the 5 was a huge part of that success. Those guys are not on the same level is the first part of that I don't quite like. I don't like that analogy.
David Lee, two-time All-Star, routine 20 and 10 guy, different generation, but pretty damn good player for what that generation asked of power forwards.
I just think of Sabonis as like a different level of guy. I'm not saying there's not similarities, but I think Sabonis is a little bit higher up, like more of a legit, feels like a good all-star. Could, on a good year, maybe sneak into like 13 all NBA center. Like, I think that's the quality. Well, not the positions don't exist anymore, so that whatever. But I get it, because I think particularly unless they kind of have two paths. I think it's either you improve on the Harrison Barnes spot and like clone Keegan Murray in some way, which is going to be really expensive, or you get a different kind of center to unlock certain things. I think that's the two more drastic ways to change out the roster. So yeah, I don't love it, because I like the idea that they have found something here, and I like the idea that the Sabonis has been a big part of this, and that him and Fox have this chemistry, and it really works. But the nature of the league is it demands improvement. It demands change if certain things don't work. I also wonder what their patience would be, right? Like, I wonder if it is, like, do you owe it to Fox based on how he's played to say after this year, if you don't get as far as you want, you have to look in a different direction? I don't really think that's totally fair, but I could understand the argument is as weird as it can be.
Well, let's go through both pathways, because I think the Barnes slot is the obvious. I mean, that could be improved upon as soon as this year, for all we know. That's their trade chip. I don't think Barnes has started the season too great. What type of player? Is there a specific guy that comes to mind? Or what qualities would you think would get you to a player good enough to compensate for what Sabonis doesn't do well, to elevate the Kings to, you're talking about, can beat Denver, can beat Phoenix, can beat even Golden State, who they lost to last year, Boston, Milwaukee, on that level of contender? What do you want if they're improving on the Barnes slot? Because they passed on Kuzma, they passed on Jeremy Grant this past offseason. I think you and I agree that probably isn't going to get them over to that level of team. So who would, or what qualities do they need that would?
I think you want someone else. You need someone that can really create for others in a way that would take some of the pressure off of Fox and give yourself some more diversification. I think you would want someone that can shoot, and I think you'd want someone that can hang perimeterly on defense and is really engaged in that way. Like if you're going to keep this roster as it is, and maybe like find some other wings, like maybe you turn Herter into a more defensive oriented or something, or like just flip one of those guys into like your version of KCP, and then you get like Aaron Gordon, like that type of player. But like those guys are very rare. Like there's a reason Aaron Gordon and like Jeremy Grant is a lesser version of Aaron Gordon in a lot of ways, but like there's a reason Denver prioritized that specific skill set and that kind of body type and that kind of frame to play next to another center that you would have some defensive concerns about. Right? Mm-hmm. But they then said, we're also going to get all the big wings. So, like, I think if you're going to improve on the Barnes spot, it has to be something like that. But finding that guy, that's tricky. It's like, are you renting Bojan Bogdanovic is not an answer to that. Like, there's not Jason Tate. If you just said, let's trade for him, that's not really, I think, the answer to that at the scale.
Well, even beyond this
season,
want. Like, it doesn't have to just be guys who are available right now. Like, if you're just taking any player in the league, just play complete dream. Realistically, Barnes plus picks, even next offseason. It's hard. I agree. It's hard. I mean, I thought John Collins, like, I know that wasn't gonna get them to the peak level we're talking about, but like a player like that, and I think a lot of it has to do with the defensive end personally. Like, I think getting a real help defender would go a long way for them. But it's like imagine if like Nick Batum, the way he's playing with Embiid, like that could have been for this season, but who long term is that? Like
Rocco 4 years ago. Rocco like 4 years ago would have made, I think, a ton of sense.
Yeah, but I want bigger. Domantas Sabonis is like 6'9". I want somebody that's like bigger and taller than Sabonis, who's like theoretically their 4, but almost operates kind of like a center on, a throwback rim protector center on defense, Maybe Miles Turner. Just kidding.
Chet?
I just, it's tough because the shooting is the key part. The shooting and the ability to kind of play perimeter basketball is the key part, and that's why I thought Collins. I mean, Jaren Jackson, right? Like that would probably be the epitome of what you want because he's a little more mobile and versatile than Turner. But yeah, it's a fascinating question that might not have a real answer, and that might be why it has to be the replacing Sabonis route. But when we talk about that side of it, Chris, Domantas Sabonis is under contract through 2028, making $40+ and then $50+ million. So that's kind of, to me, where the thought exercise runs out a little bit is I don't see a pathway where, unless it's something like an injury or some sort of major shakeup, that they would trade a guy who they just paid reams of money to acquire. I think it has to be the context around it, and then at least roll with that for another season 2, and then see, okay, maybe now we've tried all these other things. We need to confront the Sabonis thing. I just don't think it's going to happen soon. I don't think it can.
It's also just hard to do those kind of trades unless you kind of for sure know you have the clear evolution, and those kind of trades are pretty rare, where you're getting a trade where it's a kind of clear upgrade in some way. The other kind of, like, if they were gonna maybe find like a different kind of backup center too, that could be interesting. If one of the if they could find like their version of like a Mitchell Robinson type or like an Isaiah Hartenstein type, that would be the other path where I think you could kind of gummy some things up and make it work in some way. The other part of this, Brendan. Well, no, I'm just saying as like another like big to bring in and have like a backup. Like if you go at like big wing and then got like a really good backup center, there's a path there to me that you could kind of fudge some stuff and figure it out. And try some weird stuff. And I think Mike Brown would like... Also, just Mitchell Robinson is just like having a wild offensive rebounding year. And that guy, I'm just kind of ready for that guy to like have his shooting normalized to some degree. And like should be shooting like 70% from the field.
I'm ready for Sacramento to not play Trey Lyles at center. If we're talking about backup centers. He's back. He's not a 5. Play him at the 4. Not a 5. Chill. And... root for Alex Len to recover quickly so that he can fill that slot, because I think he's their answer there.
Yeah. The other, maybe there's a De'Aaron Fox conversation that I think maybe we could punt to next week, just because I think there's a lot of meat on that bone. So let's just ask this:
we talked about like
their yes, and we're going to talk about him a ton this year, but of like their fringe role guys, who do you trust the most right now? Of they're kind of like the Davion Mitchells, the Trey Lyles, like of that class of role guys on this team, who do you feel most confident in? Who do you trust the least in how they're being used? Trey Lyles at center is the answer for the one I trust the least.
So you stole mine. That's
yeah. I mean, just him playing center is just like an insane. It just doesn't it. It's not like you're getting small ball 5 benefits. It's just like it's doing something that doesn't actually work.
Yeah. They just don't trust JaVale McGee. So I think he might be the guy that I trust the least. I would say most is Malik Monk, but I don't know if he counts.
No, he's a little too good. I think like Sasha Venskov is probably like the guy that I would trust like the most, just because the skill set is fun.
I'm fascinated by the fact that Vezenkov and Micic both came over this offseason, and neither of them are really playing. Usually it feels like there's kind of that built-in promise for those Euro guys where it's like you're going to have a role. We're not going to promise you it's a starting spot or something, but then the teams are good enough where it's like we're not going to disrupt everything just to force you in. And now both of these guys are like 30-year-old rookies who don't even have a rotation spot. So I like Vezenkov. I think he has more to offer than he's been able to. I know the defense isn't great, but that's the case for a lot of their role players. I think the Davion Mitchell thing is maybe running its course. And maybe the answer here, like I don't think Duarte's done anything inspiring. You know, he's fine. Like he could probably be in a rotation, but he's not been some revelation here. Maybe that's the answer in season this year. Maybe it's the Barnes thing if you can really do it, but otherwise it's like let's just go get a really good seventh man, sixth man, you know, and maybe that'll make us enough improved over last year with some improvements from our best players that we can win a series. You know, Keegan Murray's better, Malik Monk is better, Fox is better. Let's get another rotation player and roll it out. That might be what they do because, again, to your point, every trade's hard. Like, none of this is going to happen tomorrow.
I'm looking at the 2021 draft class real quick as far as Davion Mitchell goes. Weird draft, obviously. COVID year, all that stuff. Oh, no, sorry, not this is the year post-COVID year. Excuse me. They take Mitchell
Still
at 9.
Still a COVID year, technically.
Yeah, but not as weird as the year before. So here are the picks after that. Zaire Williams, James Bouknight, Primo, Duarte, Moody, Kispert. The one that they should like maybe feel some regret about is Trey Murphy at 17, and then Jalen Johnson at 20. One of those two guys on this team instead of Mitchell.
Murphy especially, because Murphy was talked about as a lottery guy, whereas I think Jalen Johnson, he was in the mix, but I think it's been kind of a surprise that he's developed the way that he has, whereas Murphy, it was like plug-and-play 3-and-D guy. He was a junior, whereas Jalen Johnson was a freshman. But that whole late lottery, it's like after Franz, Davion, Zaire Williams, Bouknight, like you said, Primo, Duarte, who we just mentioned, Moody, Kispert. Yeah, it's like a bunch of wings who just have not worked out for various reasons. Maybe it was the fact that these guys were missing games and scouts couldn't come in and out as much. But even like the Tennessee guys, Keon Johnson and whoever the other one was, Jaden Springer, they've been, slow to bloom / not really bloomed. Yeah, Quentin Grimes, though. I mean, you mentioned the KCP, right? That could have been their guy. But I don't think anyone thought Grimes would go 10.
No, but it's just in retrospect, there's probably maybe Murphy would have been nice, but you can't draft as a lot of the more and more I learn and talk about basketball, and the more you realize that the draft often just chaotic. But
but imagine this team with Keegan and Trey Murphy together. Whew. Crazy. You could play those two at like the 2 and the 3, and then still add one of these types of big forwards we're talking about with Fox. That's really what you need to do. You probably need to put 3 wings and forwards between Fox and Sabonis in the lineup. You mentioned the Herder spot. Like, what can you do there? Who can you get that's like a big 2? That's probably the best path, and then just hope that your kind of size and force makes your defense good enough to win. But they have chips to play. I'm excited to see what they do.
Let's end there. I'm Chris Manning. That is Brendon Kleen. This has been the Just Basketball Show, your twice weekly look at all things hoops. Back later this week, Brad Rowland, Eastern Conference check-in, Eastern Conference tiers, Eastern Conference big questions, surprising teams, player of the season, all of that and more. Thanks again to Dylan Heiser for his work on video production. Back at you again later this week. Enjoy the hoops, everybody.